This is Speaking of Natives. I'm Harlan McKosato. Welcome to the program. And with me in studio today is Mr. Sherman Alexie, one of those Northwest Indians that we all love and hate. But to tell you more about him is our bio girl, or our bio woman. And she's not biodegradable, but she is the lovely Sarah Ortiz. Sarah.
Ah, yes. Sherman Alexie grew up on the Spokane Indian Reservation in Washington and is the author of such acclaimed novels as Reservation Blues and Indian Killer. He is also a poet and a screenwriter for films such as Smoke Signals and The Business of Fancy Dancing. Sherman was named a writer for the 21st century by The New Yorker, and he has been described as one of the major lyric voices of our time and one of the most acclaimed writers of his generation. His most recent book is a collection of short stories, 10 Little Indians. His readings can be raucous, fascinating, and even fractious.
Thank you, Sarah. Boy, you know what? I need to take Sarah around to do my introduction.
I know, exactly.
Wasn't that great?
Can you come read that again?
Welcome to Speaking of Natives, Sherman.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Laughing. McKosato made me laugh for some reason this time. How do you spell that? McKosato.
You know what? It's spelled M-C-K-O-S-A-T-O. The M-C comes from Sky Irish census taker when we first got put on the reservation, the Sac and Fox people, because my great-great-grandfather was named McKosato. And so that's where that comes from.
Wow.
Yeah. People say, are you Irish? I'll be like, no. Are you Japanese? Because it kind of sounds Japanese. But no.
Oh, okay. So now I understand.
Yeah.
So, I just remember the first time I met you, you were looking for sheep because you had to give them for some marriage at the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You
kept asking people if they had sheep.
I need a few. Yeah.
I need a few sheep to give to my wife's family.
Okay, we're going to play a game of 10 questions.
Oh, okay.
All right. So 10 questions.
10 little, 9 little, 8 little questions.
And yeah, because it's kind of like 10 little Indians.
Yes.
But, okay, now, one of the things that I've always found, I don't know whether you like this or not, but when you're dealing with your fans and you're dealing with your press, one of the things that always comes up is what is an Indian?
Yeah.
And, so after all this time, after, 17 novels and all these short stories, and you've become famous, and you've had plenty of time to think about this question, right now, today, to you, what is an American Indian?
My first response was, with every book and with every year that goes by, I'm less and less sure. So I guess my answer is I don't really know specifically, but I do know that within about 2 minutes of talking to a person, I can tell how Indian they are.
How's that?
Just
give me one example, just off the top
vocabulary. Whether or not they've made me laugh. If they've made me laugh within 30 seconds, they're probably Indian, even if they're white. So it's this culture, sort of unspoken, unrecognized cultural signifiers, and I don't know how to define them other than laughter, a certain inflection in their voice, the way they shake my hand. We do that. Comparing family tree thing, like, oh, you're Spokane? Did you know Leonard?
Yeah.
I know Leonard.
In fact, you were the one who coined this phrase that I've stolen, and that is, there was this whole talk about 6 degrees of separation, and I said, well, there's 2 degrees of separation, and you said,
what did I say?
There's 1.5.
There's
in the Indian world, there's 1.5.
1.5 degrees. Did I say that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
so
good.
I've been using that, and I give you credit for it every now and then.
Okay, every now and again. 1.5 degrees of separation. Well, my new
in
one
the Indian
is,
world.
You're an Indian if I know somebody you slept with. So there it is.
There it is. Okay, now you said this too, probably on many occasions, but I remember you saying it on one of our other interviews, was that all artists exploit to some degree, whatever their subject matter might be. So does that mean that you've exploited Native people and or Native culture?
Oh, definitely, certainly, and I'm not the only one.
Right.
So I'm quite aware of that, but I'm supposed to do it. The fact is that artists are supposed to chase after some version of the truth. Artists are supposed to challenge, offend, re-examine, be critical, celebrate, praise, all of those things. And the fact is that in order to do that, you have to talk about everything, every detail. And so often, because other people, non-artists, aren't familiar with that, aren't comfortable with that, don't want that, it becomes this huge conflict. And it's supposed to be a conflict. By definition, an artist is supposed to be in conflict with his community. An artist who is not in conflict with his community is an advertising writer. I am not in public relations. I am in art.
Yeah, and I say the same thing when people ask me to come to speak or come to MC an event. And I say, you know what? Political correctness is not entertaining,
Yeah.
and it's not challenging. That might not be political correct, in the circle that you're in. But hey, when you ask, for me to come to MC an event, that's what you're going to get. And it's the same thing with you. And people should recognize that by now.
Yeah, and mostly they do, but they still try to control me.
Don't you hate that?
Yeah, and the thing is, the effort to control what I say or to monitor what I say always causes the reverse. That I may come into something not even planning on being even remotely controversial. But if somebody says, something like, well, or tries to tell me there are kids in the audience, that's, definitely going to make me push boundaries. So, I'm a reactionary, arrogant, opinionated, mouthy person. I'm not going to hide that. It's who I am as an artist. And so, but the fact is, it's who everybody is as an artist in the creation of their art. They put on different public personas, but that's what art is. It's an arrogant pursuit. And so I'm just more honest about my arrogance, I guess, which makes me even more arrogant.
I know that very well.
I'm arrogant about my arrogance.
It seems like ever since your first book of short stories, The Lone Ranger and Tonto,
yeah,
Fist
Tonto,
Fight in Heaven.
The Indian guy.
It's the other way around.
Yeah, Fist Fight in Heaven.
Fist Fight in Heaven, which is being reissued, by the way.
Yeah, it has been reissued. Yeah, with 2 new short stories from that era. It's like a DVD where you get the director's cut.
Right.
So now Lone Ranger Tonto
bonus material.
Yes, bonus material. There's a commentary.
Ever since that, though, ever since I remember reading that for the first time and thinking to myself, you know what, this guy's got a point to prove, and have you figured out what that point is, and have you proven it yet?
Oh, I don't know, but I think somebody, a student said something really nice to me today over at IAIA. Really nice. She said, and it puffs me up, of course, and makes me happy and proud and arrogant again. But she said, I think Native American literature can be broken down to, before Sherman Alexie and after Sherman Alexie, and so nice. But I think in some sense what happened was, Lone Ranger and Tonto was this sort of everyday realism. It didn't, aspire to the romantic heights of Scott Momaday, or the apocalyptic heights of Leslie Silko, or the political heights of Simon Ortiz. It really stayed down and basic. And I wrote like I talked at that time, a reservation Indian kid. And so I think that simple res voice was new.
Yeah, and that's what made it appealing.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, coming from a Native community, and it's those what you call those recognizable cultural, factors that you see or hear or read. And I said, you know what, this guy's Indian. And I think that's what made you different, is that you weren't trying to be something else. You were just authentic.
Well, I was thinking, the thing is, I was far less educated than all the other Native writers at the time.
Well, we could tell that, too.
Yeah, they were a lot smarter. So, I think, reading mine, he's Indian. He's not educated.
No, but it was, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, do you think there was a time, I mean, when you think back about our great-grandmothers, our great-grandfathers, I mean, we're in such a different world now. Even our mothers and fathers, the generation before us, it seems like there's our society has shifted and natives have shifted with it in this way. I think that perhaps in the past there was more of a essence or more of a more value put on nurturing our relationships with one another because we were more dependent on one another. Mm-hmm. Now that we've sort of become isolated and more independent, I think it seems like we try to nurture our own needs. Do you see that within Indian people?
Wow.
Or all people?
Man, that's a huge question, Harlan. My first response was, that's probably a great thing. I wouldn't say it's a great thing for white folks. Mm-hmm. I think one of the problems within white liberalism certainly is that movement towards self-help rather than the sense of tribal identity, of group identity, of helping others. But inside the Native American world, I think our tribalism has become dysfunctional. I think our sense of community has prevented and limited a lot of people from exploring their potential, from realizing their ambitions, or even from having ambitions. I think we've trapped a lot of young people inside the idea of tribe, and that to deviate from tribal belief and thought in any form whatsoever is betrayal. So I think the notion of self-help, self-awareness is probably a great thing in the Native American world, like it was in the white liberal world in its early stages. Mm-hmm. I think it really expanded consciousness. In terms of literature, for a parallel, I would consider what's happening now in the Native American art world sort of like what happened with Allen Ginsberg and the poem Howl in San Francisco, in the late 50s into the early 60s. I think that explosion of individuality is a great thing in the Native American world.
We're going to take a break right now, and we're talking with the Shermanator, Sherman Alexie. Just made that one up, and he's dishing out Shermanisms right and left. And we're going to take a break right now because I need one. And when we come back, we're going to spend a little bit more time with Sherman Alexie. Okay, we're back in studio now with Sherman Alexie, who is the acclaimed writer and author and filmmaker, and he's with us here in studio. And Sherman, there was an image that stuck in my mind was this last fall, Hurricane Katrina, all these black folks, poor black folks, stuck at the Superdome, stuck on their roofs, and there was all this talk about displacement and loss of culture, and I even heard somebody try to compare it to the Trail of Tears.
Wow.
And I mean, in your mind, though, is there any comparison when it comes to the displaced people of New Orleans with Native people of this country?
Wow. Well, in terms of being ignored, certainly. But, it was always viewed very simply by both sides of the argument, really in simple terms, the idea that racism caused this. Well, certainly part of it was racism, but also, nobody mentioned the fact that middle class and black folks, middle class and upper class black folks got out. They
got out.
Yeah, they were gone,
right.
Right? So it was really an issue of class. And once you went outside the inner city of New Orleans and into other rural areas, as many poor white people were displaced and destroyed by this and still don't have any help. So it really was an issue of class and not race. And that's one of the problems with liberal politics these days, is that we've become so obsessed with race, with our own identities, that we forget to think about this in terms of class. And the fact is that right now, my sons, 8 and 4, are awesomely privileged. I am in the top 10% of income in the United States. I live in a great city, in a great neighborhood, and my kids go to great schools. And if somebody somehow thinks that my children are more disadvantaged because they're Indian than a white kid living on a farm in Iowa, they're foolish and they're being racist against that white kid. So it's class. So in terms of poor people being taken advantage of, being ignored, yes, I can see how they would compare that to the Trail of Tears. But there was also an aspect to it that is not discussed, and it was amazing. I remember I got mad, at seeing the people waiting for help.
So did I. I was like,
mad.
What is taking so long?
I got mad at the government, but I got mad at them for waiting. Yeah. I kept thinking, it may be this, and it made me remember my childhood on the res, where I saw people give up. there's some people, my peers, I can remember the moment, the event, the action where they gave up. And so I felt that sense of giving up, or people who have already surrendered. And it got me more mad at the government and at people in power. But I also had my share of anger at the people who had given up. I mean, I remember saying to my wife, and she got so mad at me, I said, if it was us and we were poor and my 2 sons, I'm sorry, I would have put them on my shoulders and walked out of there, 30, 40, 90 miles. And then I read later, there's this guy from New Orleans, he wrote an essay in the Harper's where he was there not too long after, and like a mile away from the Superdome in middle class white and upper class white neighborhoods, a mile and a half, nobody there. There were stores that were completely open and stocked, and so, through both things, the fact that they're oppressed and powerless and the fact that they've surrendered and given up in a lot of ways, all that combined in this huge mess that created this.
I tell you what, here's something that's really frustrating and really breaks my heart, is this whole meth or methamphetamine crisis that is taking place on our reservations.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about people giving up. To me, it's at a crisis. You hear stories about these deals gone bad, people getting murdered. What does that say about the reservation life? When meth and people who are dealing meth can target us and say, you know what, these people are prime targets for this kind of destruction or this destructive drug.
Well, I came out of the res closet, so to speak, about 1.5 years ago. Wherever I go now, I tell young people, you want to save your life, you want to have a chance, get your ass off the res as quick as you can. Leave the res. For most of our history, Native Americans were kinetic, nomadic, and went with the food and the hope and the chance. And that they put us on reservations to kill us. And I don't know why or what happened, but we've accepted the reservation. But the fact is, it was a prison. It was designed as a prison. Its fundamental nature is that of a prison.
It's socialism right in the middle of a democracy.
Exactly. It's Little Russia's. I remember growing up and wondering why I was standing in line for food like Russians on TV. Why are we the only, starving communists in the United States? So get off.
Let me ask you one last question. And I was thinking 10 questions for Sherman in 20 minutes. I don't know if we can do it. I bet against myself, but at least we got to about 8. But I guess if you try to get away from the cynicism that you and I both share,
yeah.
That's almost essential for us to survive of what we've been through. I grew up in a poor community in Oklahoma that was very dysfunctional, and from your writing, that we it seems like we've come from that same background. But today, I think our generation, I don't know if it was our generation or the generation before us, but ever since then, we've been more influenced by pop culture than traditional culture. I mean, we both agree with that, but there are still life lessons that I think are traditional, and when you think to the people who raised you, who shaped you, there has to be some positive influence out there. Even if back when I was growing up, my hero was the family dog, Shaft, because he was so independent, and I was just like, I want to grow up and be like Shaft, but. When you look back, what are those life lessons that you were taught? I guess here's the question, Sherman. Despite all our dysfunctionalism, what does Native America have to offer to the rest of society?
2 things came to my mind: the power of storytelling and humor. If when I look back at the great parts about growing up on the reservation and the great people in my life on the res, even the ones who were messed up,
right?
My father, my mother, my siblings, my aunts, uncles, everybody is funny in every situation. So to deal with the world, I mean, the world's absurd. So you have to be equally absurd. And that's what Indian people taught me and continue to teach me. Face the world, face your adversaries with absurdity. They don't know what to do with it.
They don't know what to do. Yeah, pull the old Indian trick on them.
Yes.
That's the oldest Indian trick in the book.
Yes.
Okay, Sherman Alexie, I wish you so much luck in the future with your family, your career. You're doing such a great job at changing the image of Native Americans in a good way. And sometimes, people don't agree with it. But, hey, that's what change is all about, right?
It hurts.
It hurts. That's right. Hurts so good. All right. Sherman Alexie, again, thank you for being with us here on Speaking of Natives, and hope to see you sometime again in the near future.
Thanks, Harlan.